Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody here tonight. Thank you for coming on a nice, warm, hot day. We certainly had a hot spell recently, so the topic of climate and climate warming is perfect for this kind of situation. What I'd like to do is, first of all, give you a little bit of background, very brief. I'm involved in this, and a group of us, purely out of our own interest and curiosity. We're not funded by anybody. We don't get anything from this. It's just that, for myself personally, having studied sedimentology and climate change and followed it my entire career, and I'm in the oil business, when the comment came out that CO2 was causing climate change, and I've been seeing climate change throughout geologic history, that caused me to ponder. And then when the comment came out about CO2 being a bad molecule, when I understand it's the lifeblood of plants and growth, that caused me to ponder as well. So then I dug into this a little more, and we got a group formed, and this is, you'll see what our purpose of our mandate is and what we're trying to do. And I welcome you to hear our story, but also I know a number of you disagree, and I welcome that as well. And I would like to learn and understand from you the basis that I'm missing or we're missing, and try and understand this. It's in the pursuit of knowledge and understanding, and ultimately what I'd like is a proper debate in Jersey with the scientists from both sides of the argument to really talk about it. And I mean scientists worldwide we could bring in, and both sides. So that's what I'd like to see happen, but we'll see. So the first speaker tonight is Professor Adrian de Meade. He's a professional engineer. You can see his credentials, and he's going to give a bit of a talk on it from his perspective. And then I'm going to follow, and because I'm a scientist, I got lots of graphs and data. So I love that stuff. So you'll hopefully bear with me, and I'll walk through the reasoning why I think there's cause for concern with the claim that mankind CO2 is driving a climate crisis. So that's the basis of why we're here. Okay, I'll turn it over to you, Adrian.
Okay. Well, welcome. Over 100 years ago, H.L. Mencken wrote, "The whole aim of practical politics is to keep the populace alarmed and clamorous to be led to safety by an endless series of hobgoblins, all of them imaginary." In these days of 24-hour news and social networks, politicians have much more control over hobgoblins than H.L. Mencken ever envisaged. The hobgoblin of sustainability research in the 70s was radioactive waste. It dominated all the discourse in Britain, especially from Friends of the Earth, and stopped the industrial development of a UK civil nuclear industry completely. I remember the head of Friends of the Earth describing his Damascene moment when he realised that nuclear power was not evil. A bit late. Nuclear power generation is now viewed as green, but the UK current developments of nuclear power stations are led by a wholly owned French state company, not by a British company. Pressure groups and politicians only needed the single word radioactive to justify their position scientifically. Yeah? Radioactive waste is not a big problem because there isn't much of it. The most intense has a short half-life. 30% of it can be recycled, and just as an example, nuclear-powered submarines can operate for 25 years without refueling and can stay submerged for up to 200 days. So the single word was a problem. So, for every complex problem, there is an answer that is clear, simple, and wrong. As an amusing aside about the science, phlogiston was a substance which was supposed to be inside materials that burn. Wood contained phlogiston, and metal did not. The theory dominated chemistry for 100 years, before some phlogiston deniers at Oxford University discovered oxygen. and use that to explain why things burn. 100 years. Single terms do not capture either scientific ideas or complex technological systems. Politicians aim at reducing opposition by misrepresenting or discrediting their opponents, not by telling the truth or being open to argument. We have become used to a dominant ideology preventing debate. Attack the speaker, not the argument. The quasi-religious climate denier, indoctrination at schools and universities, the cancelling of people with opposing views. These days we cannot use words like lying, so the term performative has become popular to describe political language. Performative means insincere or inauthentic with the intention of impressing others. Do you remember David Bellamy? Always on TV, always presenting entertaining and informative programmes. 22 years ago, he wrote a Daily Mail article calling man-made global warming poppycock. He was immediately cancelled by the BBC and never appeared again. To his death, he maintained the position that the BBC was silencing dissent. The current hobgoblin is net zero, and CO2, the single parameter used to justify technology, as diverse as windmills at sea, many miles from electric demand, solar panels on farmland, heat pumps, electric cars made in China, and so on and so forth. Nowhere has the justification of a complex technical system by a single term led to more ridiculous decisions than the Drax power station. This was once the UK's largest coal-powered, most modern coal-fired power station. Now, it seems that burning coal produces CO2, which the hobgoblin says is destroying the planet. But burning wood does not produce CO2. Why? Because we can grow more wood from trees. So, Drax now burns wood, not coal. Unfortunately, that means burning 8 million tonnes of wood a year. 7 million tonnes come across the Atlantic and none comes from the UK. I didn't know trees grew that fast. Whoops. No accounting for CO2 for the CO2 of pellet production and transporting them 6,000 miles. Drax received £870 million in subsidies by 2024 since converting from coal. You couldn't make it up. A commercial energy production system requires a complete technical evaluation. Money and balance sheets are no basis for decisions about energy efficiency. Consider offshore windmills. Energy is used for making concrete, about 2.5 tonnes per windmill. Transporting it to the site and laying it on the seabed. Similarly for all the other parts. Carbon fibre for the blades delivered from China. When wind farms are operating, ships have to go out for maintenance and repair. The grids to deliver electricity undersea and over land to distant demand and provide backup gas-fired stations for when the wind doesn't blow, and so on and so forth. At end of life, at least the bits above the wave has to be removed and disposed of. Energy accounting says that the energy used to create and run a wind farm from cradle to grave, compared with the energy produced in its lifetime, can be used to measure efficiency and decide whether it is sensible to build it. You can see that this is the polar opposite to a single parameter. It is incredibly complex and there are many, many variables. Energy and other technical variables are quoted, but selective data and timescales are used to support whatever argument is being promoted. Temperature and CO2 are the most misrepresented data because they are fundamental to the argument that our activities are causing global warming. If man-made CO2 is driving our planet's temperature, then the temperature should consistently rise and fall after the CO2 concentration rises and falls, because it's a dependent variable. It's easy to show that annual temperature movements often lead those in CO2, as well as the other way round. So CO2 might be rising because the planet's warming. Both of these deductions are both right and wrong. The data, mathematical data on climate, is called stochastic data. It means you can look for pattern in it, but you can't use it to predict. Now, virtually every climate change company, organisation in the world is violating that fundamental rule of mathematics by using stochastic data to predict. They don't tell you that. Fundamental mathematics is regularly ignored by all state institutions. Well, let's leave the science debate for a minute. Let's follow the money. DRAC's operating profit is about 900 million a year. And if you had bought shares last year, you'd be sitting on 35% profit. Makes your dividend in the bank look a bit silly, doesn't it? Solar Power, Hive Energy, is preparing to appoint administrators just months after securing a £60 million UK taxpayer-backed loan. Approved by a politician, no doubt. This is all peanuts compared with the offshore wind farms, the creation of a major new industry by a government. We all know that governments are good at that. There are many ways that a government can fund a new industry. The UK tends to use guaranteed prices for their output, paying them when the wind doesn't blow or when it blows too fast. Because there are many ways, it is easy for politicians to fool us by choosing the ones to highlight or hiding the subsidies in general taxation, which is the current trend in the UK. So your general taxation will be used for subsidies, but it won't be highlighted, so nobody will know about it. Whatever the method, you, the taxpayers, fund them. This year, Ørsted, a Danish company, said it would resubmit its cancelled plans for a massive Hornsea wind farm off the east coast of England next year after previously pulling out. So it pulled out and now it's going back in. Why? Well, Miliband offered much higher additional subsidies, guaranteeing payments extending from 15 to 20 years, estimated to cost up to £1.8 billion a year. Miliband was over a barrel. He was so financially and politically committed that he had to give in to Ørsted's threat. The UK started wind farm subsidies 35 years ago, would you believe? So by the time Miliband plan is extended, it will guaranteed over half a century of subsidies. In Europe, nearly 4,000 turbines are decommissioned annually, equating to several full wind farms a year. These subsidies will never end. Electricity generators don't last long in salt water. Lots of the wind farms are advertised as having a 30-year life. One's recently been pulled out at 10 years. Ørsted recently raised $9.4 billion due to material adverse development in the US market. So it had to raise debt in America because the system was different there. What's the difference between the US and the UK? Trump versus Miliband. Trump said no, Miliband said yes. Yeah? A wind farm is well named. It doesn't generate electricity, the individual windmills do. Because the wind has low energy density, there are lots of windmills spread over large areas of seawater. Hornsea 4 off the east coast of England proposes 180 windmills over 190 square miles of seabed. All of these windmills have to be individually connected to each other and to a wire that carry the electricity to the land, and then overland to distant demand. That's a real problem with windmills. They're a long way from where you want the electricity. Ideally, you want the electricity to be on your doorstep. Michael Kelly, a government chief scientific advisor, said the scale and cost of rebuilding the UK's electricity grid is so vast the country is heading for an economic crash. He estimates the cost of transforming the national grid could reach £1.4 trillion over 30 years. That's just the grid associated with it. Offshore wind farms are not alone. The taxpayer subsidises solar panels, heat pumps, electric vehicles. Stellantis, which manufactures Alfa Romeo, Chrysler, Citroën, Fiat, Lancia, Maserati, Opel, Peugeot and Vauxhall, sorry, couldn't remember all those, has reported a $26 billion write-down on its electric vehicle business. The chief executive of Ford unveiled a $3.7 billion annual loss 2 months after it booked a shock £15 billion write-down on an aggressive bet on electric vehicles that has backfired spectacularly. In the past year, the world's biggest car makers have written off more than $60 billion from their balance sheets as they retreat from electric vehicles. I think the customer has spoken. That's the punchline, said Jim Farley, the chief executive of Ford. Perhaps he knows more than our politicians. Net zero is financially ruinous. Steadily deindustrialising countries such as UK and Germany are increasingly alone in leading the net zero financial calamity, with energy costs about 4 times that of the US. Jersey has already spent about £1 million on offshore wind farm consultants. They could have had me for free. And about £4 million subsidising 1,200 electric vehicles from the so-called Climate Emergency Fund. It seems that we helped solve the end of the world problem by subsidising electric mopeds. Risible or laughable? Jersey's pledged net zero spending totals around £23 million for 2022 to 25, with actual allocations through 2024 of approximately 15 to 18 million. Total expenditure to date is not publicly detailed. Jersey is coming late to the net zero party, just as everyone else is leaving. Once Jersey politicians commit to the subsidy path, they will be trapped, perpetually industry's milk cow. Jersey needs to solve present-day problems, hospital facilities and healthcare, support for the disabled and elderly, not pretending to save the world. Thank you.
I suggest rather than having questions at the end, we could, Adrian, do you mind taking some questions now?
No, not at all.
I think it's better to do that. One, my wife wanted me to make sure I mentioned washrooms are downstairs, exit here, water is downstairs as well, just for those reasons. Okay, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, you mentioned how much money UK taxpayers' money is being spent on renewables. I just wondered if you knew the figure for fossil fuel companies.
It's very hard to judge. There's so many different. Well, I can quote you a whole range of different amounts of money.
The number is £17.5 billion.
Sorry?
The number is £17.5 billion per year of
Well,
UK taxpayer money.
Your number is.
No, that is
somebody else's number is not, because it depends whether it's properly classified or not.
That's the government figures.
Yes, quite. Always trust the government, their figures are probably right.
Well, the energy mix is, on some days, 50% renewables in the whole of the UK, and yet they've received less than half the subsidies that fossil fuel companies do. So I don't understand why the subsidies for renewables is a topic of conversation, really.
Do you not?
Yeah.
Hmm.
No, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Well, we'll agree to
It's
differ
only
on
fair
that.
to mention the amount of money, UK taxpayers' money that goes towards fossil fuels if you're going to mention how much goes towards renewables. It doesn't make any sense to
No,
mention
when-
one number.
what do you mean by taxpayers' money goes towards fossil fuels? If
If
we drill them out, if we drill the sea, we'd be selling that.
No, we wouldn't.
No,
Yes, we would.
No, if we open up drilling in the North Sea, that won't affect the price of oil in the UK. That oil won't even be sold in the UK.
No, but it will bring revenue into the UK.
It
For,
won't.
yes, it will. Because of the companies at the moment are getting subsidies for not drilling, and they will produce profits which we tax,
So
and
there's
we
subsidies for
could-
that drilling.
and we could claim the oil for ourselves.
But we can't
Possibly.
get, you talked about the distance that electricity has to travel with the windmills, but we get our oil from the Middle East, so that's even further away in the channel.
Yes, but the oil that we get from the Middle East is very energy dense, and the wind isn't.
But it's not renewable. It's going to run out, and it's also when we
It's
have
going to be
global
the
conflicts,
North
the
Sea
price of
oil's going to be
skyrockets.
running out the whole of my lifetime. They've been threatening the end of North Sea oil for my whole lifetime.
Yes, and it will happen in mine.
Maybe, or your children,
Maybe
or your
my
children's
life,
children.
and you don't care. Okay.
I doubt it.
Well, yeah. Right, it's my
It's
life.
amazing they
It's
can,
gonna happen in my
they
lifetime.
drill more holes and they find more oil. Look at the cracking that America's done to produce oil. America's now an exporter of oil. And we buy oil from America.
I mean, if you're going to
Fractal.
compare us to America, that's ridiculous in the first place. And I don't think America's doing that great, really. Maybe financially, but for the
You're
people
not.
of America,
Americans are paying a quarter of the price of fuel for energy that we are. We're paying 4 times as much for energy as America. Now, have you heard all the debate about artificial intelligence and data centres and the amount of energy that they're going to need?
you're doing
And our government is saying it will build these data centres. And it won't, because energy is too expensive here.
Or maybe it's good to consider the people who live in the jurisdiction before you build ginormous data centres. That might.
We'll agree to differ. Yeah.
Yeah, 2 things. One thing, I wrote it down here, you said CO2 is destroying the planet without any, just a bland statement, which is a ridiculous thing to do without any evidence. The other thing I...
No, I said the hobgoblin said that CO2
The other thing
CO2 is not ruining the planet.
Sorry,
but I didn't say that.
Could I just have a word? Thank you. The other thing, I thought I was listening to Trump's scientific officer for a while. You talk about windmills, which is a very pejorative term. I assume you're talking about wind turbines. If you're going to be using pejorative terms like that, is there any reason for me to believe anything you're saying tonight?
Attack the person, not the argument.
Well, respond to my point. Why you call them windmills and not wind
Because they're
turbines,
individual
which is
windmills
what
in a
they
wind
are.
farm.
Sorry, don't interrupt all the time. Can I just say that? Why do you call them windmills and not wind turbines, which is what they are?
Well, I'm sort of politically incorrect, perhaps. They were always
No.
called windmills in my day.
No, windmills are what you have in Holland and things that used to be here that grind
They're
corn
sort
and
of
such like.
Towers
The-
with rotating
Wind
blades.
turbines are things that generate electricity, and the fact that you won't use the correct terms sends many red flags up for me, and I think, what shall I believe anything you're saying this evening?
Yes, excellent.
Excuse me, you did use the term turbines
He did.
later on.
Yeah, he did.
You've been using windmills nearly throughout. Yes, he did use it once. I have to agree with you
Semantics,
there.
that's what the media often refer to. And
Semantics,
talk about,
that's right.
we had to tolerate your interruptions, your comments all the way through when you disagree
Yeah,
with something.
okay.
So when I was sitting, unfortunately I'm sitting in front of you, so I had to...
Well, I'm
No,
sorry
just,
that...
it was, sorry, no, it was just
Yeah.
a bit distracting.
It's a good point. He's an engineer, so he should use the correct terminology.
Yeah.
Actually, Trump is a complete idiot, which is a subjective statement.
It is very subjective, but backed up by lots of
But it's
evidence.
quite interesting, isn't it? What are we debating now? My use of language. windmills, wind turbines, wind farms. What difference does it make to the argument, other than the fact that I used the wrong term, and therefore you won't believe a word I said?
Well, you're a professor, you should use the right term.
That's again the socialist agenda. I call them the lingua fascist. We have to use this term. You lose whatever, as long as people understand what you're.
I'm not a socialist. I don't.
I'm just saying that's part of this socialist
I
agenda.
don't have political affiliation.
Which
Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
From a soil point of view, because I'm only interested in the carbon I can control, and that's in the soils. If the same actions that rebuild soil carbon also reduce emissions, restore biodiversity, improve water retention, and drought resilience, strengthen food production, and reduce resilience, on or reliance on imported inputs, why wouldn't we do them? It just makes sense to actually go through this.
I agree we should produce our own oil, and we should do everything that creates energy
It's just soil.
efficiently.
Soil, he's talking about soil.
Soil. Sorry?
Soil, not oil.
Sorry, why don't you repeat it so he can hear properly?
What's your point? Sorry, I missed
So
it.
I'll go slower. The same actions that rebuild soil carbon also reduce emissions, restore biodiversity, improve water retention and drought resilience, strengthen food production, and reduce reliance on imported imports. Why wouldn't we do them? It's a simple question.
I tend to agree with all those things.
That's the argument for for it is real, and we need to do it, and we are suffering here in the island.
Well, we might need to do it, but I view the current mechanisms that we're using as doing the opposite to that. It's that the argument is put forward all the time that the mechanisms that we're using do that, but in my view they don't. They do exactly the opposite.
You mentioned DRAX a great deal. It's been very controversial, and I think it's pretty much been discredited as a green form of energy. I think it was a little bit of a knee-jerk at the beginning. People thought, oh, it's from trees, that's renewable because you can regrow them. But I think now they were reviewing whether or not they should get their subsidies at all because it's not really renewable. So it's interesting you picked on that one because that is the one that's really up for debate.
Well, I think
Compared
they're
to wind.
all up for debate,
Compared to
but
wind or solar.
are you predicting that the government will
I'm
stop
not predicting anything,
subsidising
I'm just saying that
DRAX?
is the state of play. Is that they are, last I heard about, they were in discussion about whether or not they were going to continue to get their subsidy because people have now...
If they don't get their
considered-
subsidies, they close it down.
Well, exactly. Yeah. Anyway, with sea level rise, it will be underwater.
Oh, will it?
Yes.
for the gentleman over here, you are therefore pro more CO2.
No.
Because that increases drought
No.
resistance. No, it
No.
does. Because there's less, what's the term? Not respiration, it's,
Transport.
Photosynthesis.
with photosynthesis, there's more CO2, the plants lose less,
Water.
less water, that's right. So therefore it improves water
When you have more
retention.
CO2, the temperature goes up. And
No, but it
the
doesn't
water
really,
evaporates
does it?
fast.
Because it's logarithmic, it has virtually no effect.
Last week we had the hottest temperature ever in Jersey, and you're saying things
That's
go
weather,
up.
that's not climate, that's weather.
So the argument came.
That's heat.
Sorry, the argument came to me. Can I answer
Okay,
it?
go on.
I specifically said soil carbon, and plants depend on soil carbon. When soil carbon in Jersey
Oh,
was
okay.
10%, we could grow a lot of food. Now it's only 2%. We can only grow potatoes and grass.
But if you have more CO2, you get
No,
you get
because
bigger
the CO2 is
crops,
coming
crop
out
yields
of the
go up.
atmosphere, out of the ground and up there. We need photosynthesis to suck that CO2
Sure.
out.
No, it's more CO2 improving, like it's
Yeah, it doesn't
similar
work that
like
way.
we put CO2
Okay.
in growing tomatoes, it improves the yield. That's a
This is
well-known,
going
it's
on
been
too
known
long.
for
Yeah,
over a century.
The basic history.
That you
of the
increase
Earth-
productivity with more CO2.
You're not a
because it's plant
biologist,
food.
are you? But the basic history
It's
of the
plant
world.
food.
The basic
So you
history
need
of
to
the
check
world.
up the facts, I think. You need
I,
to look at the
we can agree to disagree on that one. That's fine. No, that's fine because I think having more carbon in the soil is a good thing. We'd agree with that. No, I think that makes good sense. So, but let me now switch modes a little bit, and what my style is to go to the data side of it a little bit, and so I will be going through a lot of information and data, and I've given you a bit of background of why I'm interested in this. I was confused by the claims that were out there, so I dug into it, and I have dug in pretty deep, and I've got all my work is available on our website, and you can go through it and see everything I've done. So first of all, let's just remember what carbon dioxide is. there's two relevant properties. It's a creator of food and oxygen, food for plants and oxygen that's released, and it's a greenhouse gas which says it has a heating effect. The importance of carbon dioxide and water equals to plants, so the relationship of carbon dioxide and water to plants is very similar to oxygen and water to humans. They're both very important to life. So I just wanted you to keep that in mind as I move forward. There are some comments earlier that you made about things starting to shift and the emphasis and concerns of CO2 and climate crisis are decreasing a bit. Well, we know of one fellow who certainly did that. That doesn't mean it's right or wrong, but Bill Gates has decided to shift his funding away from climate crisis and net zero and back to public health. And really why we're here today is I'm hoping our government can shift spending money on trying to reduce its minimal CO2 and instead use that taxpayers' money on things that make a direct impact to people of Jersey, health, etc. So that's the whole purpose of why I'm here. I served on the Public Accounts Committee. I know the value for money. When I saw this, I just decided it's time. I couldn't just sit back and do nothing. So I'm hoping, whether we agree on the impact of CO2 and soil, etc., it's really the issue of where can we best spend our money, I think is very important. So what I'm going to do in my talk, I'm going through, there's 7 main points through my research and looking at this that I'll go through. Climate change and global warming is normal, and I think anybody who follows various ice ages would agree with that, but I've got a few slides on that. I'm also going to share with you that over the history of mankind, warmer temperatures are in balance better than cold. So this fear of heating and warming up, put it in context. CO2 levels have always changed throughout the world's history. And more CO2, I'm going to share with you why I believe it's good and not bad, and I'll have the data and we can look at that. We are not in a CO2-driven climate crisis. And I'll show you the history of all of the items that are claimed to be out there that are increasing or not, and I'll show you the data behind it. The science is not settled. Science is never settled. And there's a claim that there's 99% of scientists say that. I'll show you some information. I'll show you also some very strong scientists that disagree with that. And I was just down in Washington, D.C. in a conference about this very subject. And also I'll close off by sharing with you some of the negative implications of pursuing net zero. It's not all positive, besides costs. Now I recognize these results are contrary to what you think. All I ask is that you try and have a bit of an open mind, listen through as best you can, and then we can discuss these things after. That's my only request. I get zero funding for this. I do it purely out of my belief that in researching this, that something wasn't quite right. So the first point, climate change. As you can see in this graph of the history of climate over the history of the Earth, it's always been changing. And through most of the time, the climate of the world was higher than it is today. And there's a few cartoons thrown in here. I want to thank my wife for that because she said you'll bore people with those graphs and stuff. So you're going to see this throughout, but you'll be able to easily get the message behind it. It captures your attention. And for example, this first one, natural cycles have always shaped our climate. Warming is so far is moderate and manageable, and I'll show you the information on the actual changes in climate. So the second point, mankind has thrived historically under warmer temperatures rather than colder temperatures. And when you look back at the temperatures of mankind's history in the Earth and what the average temperatures were, you'll see this. For example, during the warm Bronze Age, man survived, and then nearly had very difficult times in the Greek Dark Ages when temperatures dropped. During the Roman warm periods, when we were growing grapes in Scotland, mankind survived and did very well, and then was followed by the Dark Ages, and temperatures were much lower then. The medieval warm period saw civilization advance with positive living conditions. That was followed by the Little Ice Age, and times were very tough. These warm periods, historically, when mankind thrived, were all higher by about 0.5 degree to 2 degrees on average than what we're facing today. So I just wanted you to stop, reflect, and understand. All of this data is supported, and I can reference, and you can see that. Another element of warm versus cold is the simple fact that about 4 to 5 times more deaths occur cold-related than warm-related. And I think that should be fairly obvious to you, but I just wanted to stress that point. Warm is better than cold. So now let's look at CO2 levels. CO2 levels have been changing throughout the history of mankind and the history of the world. This data is very conclusive, that shows rapid changes and increases and decreases in CO2. Today's level, a couple points. First of all, at the time of dinosaurs, for example, the CO2 level was 2,800 parts per million. When life began on Earth, it was 8,000 parts per million. Today's CO2 is about 420 parts per million. Concentrations of up to 1,000 parts per million are common in classrooms. And if we didn't have the door open and I had a meter, it would probably be up to about 1,000 because we breathe out CO2. So I just wanted to share that with you. And CO2 emissions into the Earth occur for many reasons. The volcanic eruption made a huge impact. It spewed out this recent one. It's just an example. There's lots of things happening in nature that have an impact on the atmosphere and the world. This particular volcano erupted under the water and it spewed out massive amounts of water vapor into the air. Water vapor is a greenhouse gas, and it covered the entire Earth with that. It was a big thing, and it may have had an effect with that increased water in the atmosphere and CO2 in the atmosphere just from that one event of impacting temperature. There's many, many things that impact temperature. Another element of CO2 that's so important is the benefit to growing plants. Greenhouse gases, first of all, they keep the Earth warm. They absorb heat and radiate it back. If we didn't have that, we wouldn't exist on this world without greenhouse gases, and CO2 is one of those. But this other element I want to stress is that when CO2 increases, plants thrive. That's their source of fuel, of food and fuel. They become larger, able to absorb more CO2. And a standard practice in agricultural and greenhouses is to increase the level of CO2 to promote additional growth. And there's an example at the bottom. The only thing different in those tree growths was the amount of CO2. As they increased the CO2, they looked and the results of growth of the plants was significantly improved. Nothing else changed. Right now, when you look at the time of the track of CO2 over time, we're in what is called a CO2 famine. It's gone up from about 180 before we started burning coal and increasing it. If it had continued to decrease at the rate it was going, at 150 parts per million, plants could not live. CO2 was declining, and if it kept going, plants would not live, and then we'd be finished. Mankind did increase that CO2 level through burning coal and hydrocarbons, etc., and it went up to about 420. The optimum level for plant growth is significantly higher, and historically we've had much higher levels. The other thing that's very interesting is NASA has taken satellite photos of the Earth. And what we're seeing is significant greening of the Earth from 1982 to 2015. And a large amount of that greening is occurring at the deserts and at the edge of the deserts, because with more CO2, the plants need less water. And the reason for that is they don't have to open their pore spaces as wide. To get the CO2 they need to live, and therefore the water doesn't escape. And so they can actually live with less water. And this is well demonstrated. Crop yields. If you look at the crop yields and the improvement, it's very, very significant. And that's from CO2, added CO2 around the world. So if you worry about feeding the world, there's better and higher yields are happening now because CO2 levels are higher than they were historically when it's lower. So this, if you're concerned about this, this is a very important part. So here's a little summary slide. CO2 is plant food. It's essential for life, and it's a natural part of a healthy planet. So let's now look a little bit more. What is, if CO2 isn't driving climate, what is? Well, let's start with the sun. I think we all know the sun has a tremendous effect. Day and night, seasons, we all know the sun is a huge driver of climate. No surprise there. NASA states that the Earth's orbit, and these are called Milankovitch cycles, is the likely cause of major climate changes, including the ice ages, which is dramatic changes from cold to warm periods. Presently, right now, we're in a warm period and we're recovering from the last ice age. So when you hear about record temperatures, etc., you need to remember these are temperatures from when it was much lower and now we're rising. So you're going to get record temperatures if you're starting from a low, and it'll keep increasing until we hit another ice age. And that will happen as it has in the past. There's all kinds of these ice ages that keep repeating themselves. There's other factors that impact climate. Ocean currents have a major impact on temperatures. Clouds have a huge impact. They reflect the sun as it's coming in to start with. A 1% change in cloud cover can have the same effect as doubling CO2 levels. Greenhouse gases have an effect, absolutely. And water vapor is 90% of that. That's why we're able to live and keep going. Human permanent settlements, the urban heat island effect, is another factor. And there are other factors. The message here is climate is very complex. Mankind's contribution of CO2 makes a very minor impact on this climate. And I'll show how that works. So let's look at CO2 and how does it fit in the atmosphere. The greenhouse gas takes up 0.8% of the total atmosphere of gas. CO2 represents 5% of that. You do your math, and CO2 represents 0.04% of the total atmosphere in the Earth. Mankind's contribution to the CO2 level is only 0.0011% of that. When you look at 0.04, that's like a couple bathtubs of water in a huge swimming pool. Just to put it in context, it's a very small amount. Then you look at Jersey's total amount of human-derived CO2. If you're starting for those levels and you look at Jersey, it's less than a drop in the ocean. Just keep that in mind. So let's look at the correlation then. If CO2 is driving climate, we should see a match between CO2 and climate. And you mentioned this as well, Adrian. But if you look at it over geologic history, CO2 and its changes do not match climate changes and temperature changes. If you look in particular at around 150 years, CO2 is shooting up and spiking, and climate temperature is dropping. So there is no correlation between CO2 and climate change. Let's look a little closer, because fortunately with glaciers, they capture, you can drill cores into the glacier and get trapped gas bubbles. So you can get a very good reading at the CO2 and the temperature. And Al Gore saw this correlation and he got quite excited and said, there's a correlation between CO2 and climate, and therefore this whole thing kicked off. But what he didn't do is look closely at the data. If you look closely at the data, you see that CO2 does not start and then temperature, it's the opposite. CO2 lags temperature changes. How can it cause temperature changes if it follows? And the data is very clear on this. And if you think about it, the ocean warms and it emits gas. This is Henry's law. So warming water, warming fluids contain less gas. And you can do this experiment yourself. I encourage you, take a glass of some pop or soda pop or something and put half of the glass in your fridge and half of it leave on your table. And then come back an hour or two later and have a sip out of it. And you'll find that the warm cup is much more fizzy and bubbly than the cold one. The ocean, as it warms, releases CO2. It's a fundamental principle of Henry's law. Now, there is a good correlation, however, between sun activity and temperature, which shouldn't surprise us when we started, and we know the sun's the biggest impact, and sure enough, there's a very good correlation. But then when you plot CO2 levels on top of that, there's no correlation. Here's our summary slide. So the past has shown us that more CO2 does not mean runaway temperatures. There's no correlation between higher CO2 and higher temperatures throughout geologic time. Let's dig into this a little bit more, this heating effect. So the sun's radiation, I'll take a little bit of time here because it's important. So the sun is beaming out heat, and it's coming in, and it hits the surface of the Earth. Some of it's reflected by clouds, some of it penetrates, then it's bounced back, and then that's when the greenhouse gases come into effect. They'll capture this heat that's coming out, they'll get excited, and they'll emit energy back, and that's what keeps us warm. But here's a couple things to recognize. With added CO2, the absorption capacity of CO2 reduces logarithmically. This is a proven fact. It's like a sponge of water. When you fill it up, as you put more and more water in, it has less ability to contain more water in it. CO2 in the atmosphere has the exact same effect, and this has been proven experimentally and theoretically. We're already at the level, getting close to the level that as we add more CO2 into the atmosphere, its ability to act as a heater and keep the heat in reduces logarithmically. So this is, you're shaking your head, but afterwards I'll give you the data and show you the experiments and the references for this. But I don't think that the scientists that are pushing the climate crisis would disagree with this. And the professors will show that. I'll show you the reports. Here's Max Planck, who did the technical work on this. The spectrum of radiation from warm bodies. He shows that the impact of doubling CO2 from 400 parts per million to 800 parts per million is only 0.71 degrees centigrade. And then if you double it again, because remember, it's an exponential effect, you only, from 800 to 1600, it only gets 0.35 degrees. In other words, if you go from where we're at now, just over 400 parts per million, and go to 1600 parts per million, which will take quite a long time, the impact is only 1 degree centigrade. And this, I will show you the data and would be pleased to, you can get that and test it. This is the science, and I'm a scientist, and that's why I'm here today. So here's our summary. Bottom line, a small part CO2 plays with limited warming effect. And it's diminishing as you add more because the nature of the exponential decrease over increased amount. So we've also heard a lot about the models. Well, the models predict things, so therefore it must be right. Adrian already commented about the nature of this, and it's not possible to model it. It's very, very difficult to. And sure enough, when you look at the predictions of the models, and then you compare it to the actual, there's a big bust. So the point is the models are having a tough time predicting future climate, and yet governments are relying on these models to put in various programs, etc. So here's our summary. Climate models tend to overstate warming, observations don't. Real world data matters more than model guesswork. Observations, not models. Let's look at the data. So in summary here, the biggest drivers of climate are the sun, oceans, wind, and water vapor. Clouds, water in the atmosphere. We've all known that. You've experienced it your entire lives. The sun provides the energy. The oceans and the winds move it around. They have driven our climate for millions of years, and they continue today. It's not CO2 that's driving it. So now I'd like to go into the crisis aspect of it. Because every day the media scares us to death about increased, you'll see about a hurricane or whatever. it hits the headlines immediately. So let's look at the actual data, the scientific data of climate changes. The Earth has been warming since the late 19th century by about 1.2 to 1.5 degrees centigrade since pre-industry times, recovering a little from the last ice age. So this is not unusual. Between every ice age there's a recovery, then there's been another ice age. Over the last 540 million years, Earth's average temperature has often hovered around 19 to 25 degrees centigrade, far warmer than today, of about 16 C. During those times, we had thriving ecosystems. All of the different kinds of plants evolved and developed, etc. So today, a degree or two of variability would fit within the natural cycles. So we shouldn't be afraid and scared. Let's look at the actual crises. This one talks about heat wave index and the problems with heat waves. But when you actually look at the data, and you see where it is, and by the way, every one of these charts I have references and data for. You'll see that the spikes of heat waves were in the past, in the dirty 30s. In North America, we heard a lot about this. They had a lot of problems with farming, for example, in Saskatchewan, where my grandparents came from. So the spike was not now, it was in the past. Let's look at droughts and flooding. We hear about how terrible that is now. But when you look at the data, historically over time, these things always do happen, but the amount of it hasn't changed. So we hear the media tells you about these things, but when you dig in and look at the data, it shows that there's not the kind of variation. You know, the expression, shit happens. Well, these things do happen. Hurricanes, tornadoes, the graphs when the data show the same thing. It's not increasing from what you hear about. Tornadoes, you could even argue, are going down. And then you can see on the one chart the increased CO2 levels and what's happening. Forest fires. Forest fires are not going up. The impact of forest fires, because of all the population, is a bigger issue, but the actual number of forest fires, here's the data in the US, is not going up. All of this data is available for you. Now let's look about sea level. This is all nice, all those things are nice, but what about Jersey? And I think I heard somebody say, we're going to be flooded in a little while, you know, and all this is going to happen. I'm going to share you data that may help you relax a little bit. This isn't going to happen to Jersey. This is not what's going on. So how does sea level change to start with? Sea level changes for two main reasons. One is with tectonics, you can open up huger basins and big holes which take a lot of sea and then it would drop. And the other is ice with the glaciers. Those are the two biggest impacts of changing sea levels. As the temperature gets colder and all the water is turned into ice and you get these huge ice shields on continents, sea level drops. When it melts, sea level rises. That's the biggest impact. The other thing to remember is, and recall, is that when you have ice in water, melting it makes no difference to sea level. You can have a glass of water, fill it with ice, and watch what happens when it melts, the same level. It's only the ice that's on the continents when it melts changes sea level. Most of the ice on the glaciers in the North American continents have already melted. So yes, there's still more in Greenland and it's going to increase sea level when it melts, but a much less degree than what we've seen historically. Here's a graph that just shows the rate of sea level rise relative to ice and when it happens. The most rapid increase level is when you've got all that glaciers on land that are melting, the water's running off, and it's going into the ocean, it's rising. We're sitting at the upper right end curve. There's much less ice on glaciers on continental lands than there were in the past, and the rate of sea level rise is much less. We know that sea level's changed. We see it right here in Jersey, so I'll just bring it home a little bit. We know that this because you can go and see the dolmens. And when these dolmens were built 7,000 years ago, sea level was much lower and Jersey was connected to France. And people were just walking along and going straight across. The dolmens we see in Jersey are the same dolmens, similar style, that you see when you go across into France and wander around there, just east of here. And I've seen that. I've gone and seen these. The other element of evidence that shows that sea levels were much different in Jersey is if you go to the beach in St. Juan's and the tide's out, and you'll see the remains of a petrified forest. There was a forest there at one time in the past when sea level was much lower. And it's risen, and that's why we no longer grow trees in the middle of the beach there. So here's what sea level rise looks like. A picture of New York City, 1898 and 2017. This is the scary sea level rise that's going to flood us all. The thing I notice is difference is our cameras are better. We got color instead of black and white. So sea level rise, the facts. The evidence shows sea level rise is real, but it's slow, stable, and manageable. You should be able to sleep at night. Oh, by the way, there's some data there, actual data from Jersey, so you can see what's happening. The scale is small, so there's a little bit of a spike that occurred, and it's gone back, and it's pretty slow. But you'd know this walking around. You've lived here long enough to notice how much difference you've actually experienced. So why the scare? Be careful with the media and reporting. The two pictures on the left show weather maps. And if you look at the numbers are very similar. And then you look at the colors on the maps. On the one, it's in green. There wasn't a CO2 scare going on. This other, it's in red, and there's a whole bunch of fear coming out with the same data at a different time. So be very careful. And we've seen that in the past when there was concern that we were going to have another ice age. Magazines had all kinds of headlines saying, oh, we're going to freeze, beware. And then recently you'll see the same magazines, global warming, beware. Media loves fear. Please relax. Here's another thing to watch out for, scale. If you look on the left, this is the scale of the average temperature in Jersey. It goes in the winter down as low as 0, summer up to 30. There's a typical range that Jersey experiences. And yet what we see is the graph on the right, where they change the scale and they make a big deal out of that little bit of increase, and then to add emphasis, they change the colors. They love to put red as a scare. Same data, just puts it in context of what's happening in there. Public predictions about environmental climate catastrophes are often more dramatic than what has actually happened. There's been a whole series, there was a study that looked at 100 doomsday predictions made by environmentalists over the past 50 years. 2/3 of these predictions, when you look at it, the time has run out, and yet all of them have been turned wrong. The alarmist predictions argue for a whole bunch of things that cost us a lot of money. I suggest to our government policy should be based on evidence rather than worst case scenarios that are not showing up. So there's been a lot of effort to reduce CO2. We've had all these conferences, treaties, Kyoto Treaty, etc. So what has actually happened in the world? With all this stuff going on, and running around and doing it, spending all this money, what has happened with the actual CO2 levels in the world? They've continued to go up. As the earth warms, the oceans release CO2, as they do. That's a fact, as I mentioned earlier. And mankind is adding significant amounts. In the dates here, mankind certainly was burning fossil fuels, and it's increasing over that time period. But with all these initiatives, the point of this slide is, with everything that's been going on, including China, who's burning more and more coal, in India, this isn't going to stop. And the levels are going on like that. This is just data that's out there for you. So are we experiencing a climate crisis? And I'm suggesting to you that no, there isn't a climate crisis any more or less than there has historically. Droughts? No, there is no increase in droughts. Forest fires, I've shown you that one. Flooding, the answer is no. Hurricanes, no. The data is there. Just go and Google it and look at over the historical data, and you can find that yourself. And then there's the question in the comment, well, I believe the scientists. 99.999% of them say there's a crisis, so there must be. You know, when Columbus sailed across the Atlantic to find North America, I don't think he was doing that based on consensus. So there is consensus among scientists that temperatures have been increasing, and I agree with that. Climate is changing, it always has. Mankind has definitely increased the CO2 levels, I completely agree with that. However, where the disagreement occurs is regarding the degree to which mankind's CO2 emissions impact temperatures, or whether this is actually causing a climate crisis. So here's a list of scientists, there's many more, and I encourage you to Google and check these people out. These are very highly skilled, creditable scientists. They disagree with the climate crisis scenario. I've personally met 3 or 4 of these individuals. There was also the World Climate Declaration, signed by more than 2,000 professionals, declaring those. I'll let you read it. It's pretty much what my talk is. So there are a lot of scientists there, and then you have to ask yourself, why were these scientists making these claims? If you dig into it, you'll find there's a lot of money behind this. So I'll come to that. So there are negative implications in pursuing this. I mentioned that. You've got higher costs, lower reliability, environmental concerns of renewable energy options are real. It's not all just a bed of roses out there. Germany's situation, I think we're all familiar with the problems Germany's having as they went full into solar and wind generation under the claim that this is cheaper energy. Forget about all the subsidies and everything else. The reality in Germany is they're struggling with the highest costs and highest intermittent energy in all of Europe there. For periods when solar and wind output fell to very low levels, Germany had to go to alternative methods. They had to have backup. As soon as you double down and back up, it's obviously going to cost you more because it's not a steady, reliable supply. Britain has also invested significantly into offshore, resulting in very high energy costs. Right now, Britain has some of the highest costs in Europe. You're shaking your head, but you just look at the data of energy costs in Europe. I have another slide coming up, I'll show you. During the recent heat wave that we experienced, Britain paid, and these are facts, Britain paid around 1,400 megawatts, roughly 15 to 20 times the wholesale price for importing emergency electricity from Europe. Their system was oversaturated, they didn't have a reliable backup, and they had to purchase it. Those costs go back to the consumer. These are recent events that just happened. So here's UK's energy price. What is actually out there? I wish it was the blue, but it's not. It's the brown colors. You'll see the impact. Natural gas remains relatively inexpensive as a fuel. However, households pay considerably more for this wholesale cost because network charges, supplies, etc. Electricity also carries a range of additional costs affecting relative prices and heating. But the bottom line here is that one big thing the UK did is they moved to offshore wind, and here's what the prices of what they're actually paying. This is a reality of a person's wallet. There are other concerns with wind farms and solar panels. It uses up a large amount of land. In Jersey, we have a policy you can't even build a new building because we want to preserve our green space. And yet they're putting on solar panels that are occupying huge chunks of land. This goes against the whole premise in the first place. And that's just Jersey. But if you look at it in a macro extent, wind farms, solar panels use up a lot of land. Offshore wind farms have a lot of issues as well with marine life, birds, etc. So there's other concerns that are out there. If you look at batteries, and you're worried about third world people, etc., where do you think those batteries and lithium mines are coming from? Did you dig in to understand the amount of child labor that's going into that to get the batteries to support this? And then what do you do and clean up and dispose of these wind farms? The blades, what do you do? And excuse me if I'm getting my terminology, I'm wrong on some of these things, but I think the point of this is to understand what I'm trying to say. So what do you do with these turbine blades? What do we do with the solar panels? What do we do with disposing of the batteries? These are real problems. There are problems as well on the other side. There's always going to be some problems. That's the reality. But these are big issues. So here's our summary here. What I believe we should be doing is focusing on solutions that improve lives today and build a better tomorrow. That's real climate leadership. Trying to reduce the CO2 from our 0.001% to some target, which I don't even know is achievable or even understood, versus taking those investments and money, our money, and putting it into things that are real and make a direct impact on the people of Jersey. That's what I'm trying to address with this conference and why I'm trying to address our government. Here's just a summary. Net zero by 2050 is pointless. It's not going to happen. The changes, you've seen what's happening globally. Net zero, it's unachievable. It's unfair. What right have we to go to the third world and say, you can't produce cheaper energy, coal and gas, even though we built our economies on it? No, you have to go to higher costs. Well, meanwhile, we benefit from it. That's just not fair to these people. So I'm suggesting the challenges we face, including climate, including the fact that it gets hotter, all these things, we should deal with it. But the answer isn't in dealing with it by trying to reduce CO2. If we want to take some money, we can do things. If there's ways to help our soils with more CO2 in it, let's find ways to do that. By adding it to the soil directly. If carbon is important to the earth soil, which it is, there's things we can do. But let's do things that are real, measurable, and concrete. So those are the points I hope I covered. At least you understand where I'm coming from. They are contrary to what you read in the media. They are contrary to the 90-some% or whatever the latest number is, what scientists are said. But if you dig into that, and I've got information, many of the scientists I listed quit the IPCC because they're concerned with what was going on. And I'll let you even talk to those people if you like. But dig in yourself. All the stuff I've done is on our website. You can look at in detail. All of the slides, all the presentation material, all of the references is clearly there, or I'd be pleased to talk to you at any time. Okay? So that's my view. Clearly there are other views, and I respect that. What I'd really like is I don't want you to buy into what I'm saying because I must have some bias. I've been told I'm an oil person, so I shouldn't even be here. That's not fair for me to be here. I'm conflicted. What I'm asking for is let's have a proper debate. I will bring in non-oil people, scientists, and you can bring in your scientists, and let's have a debate, and let's make that available for all of the people of Jersey. This is costing us way too much money and time just to put our head in the sand and ignore it. We need to do something positive about it. And I think the next step is a debate, and I've asked Deputy Renoff many times for the debate. He tells me no, he knows everything about it. There's no way. But I think we should. Okay, that's my 2 bits. I'll now open it to questions. Go ahead, yeah.
Hi, thanks for that, Graham. It's nice that you've got a nice neutral position there and you're going off statistics. So just a little bit, I'm involved with island nations all over the world, and my job, after 35 years in energy, is to deliver the best cost-effective method of energy on islands around the world. And yet, oil is best, it's the cheapest, gas is cheaper. However, one thing I would like to put is there is a place for everything. There is an energy mix that we have to adopt. Moving away from carbon fuels, we'll never move away from it. That's the reality I see with working with 22 governments around the world currently. However, with innovation, we are at a crossroads where we should be embracing innovation to fix these problems. Now, I can fix problems. I can put a nuclear reactor here in 7 years, part of Rolls-Royce. Cost £80 billion to do that. Okay? However, that's a total price, and that's even to put the land back to where it was in 80 years' time. The total amount of radioactive activity is equal to about 1.5 litres of radioactivity. You know, we do this on a daily basis. You've got hydrogen. Okay, moving hydrogen fuel cells, we've deployed or deploying 7 big megawatt fields at the moment. The challenge is producing the fuel. Moving fuel to island nations like Jersey costs a lot of money. However, if you produce hydrogen on site through clever technologies, electrolysis, you know, you're starting to compete with the prices of oil and the prices of gas. Tidal, let's look at tidal. You know, there's some great technologies out there. Now, people can shake their heads at tidal, all right, and we get that. However, the key thing is you must get your cost per megawatt under £1 million development fee. All right, there are 2 companies at the moment are doing this. Look at Isle of Skye, the gentleman who's not disagreeing over there. They run Isle of Skye airport off hydrogen. You know, population are using hydrogen, and they take it out to seawater. That technology is there. You know, we live it every single day. So my argument, rather than having 2 extremes, you've got the believers, the non-believers, and this is right, you know, statistics are incredibly important, but we should be coming to the middle, embracing the technologies that are out there, and spending all that money in what I do on a daily basis to make this world a better place, a better, fairer mix, because energy equals prosperity. Fact. And I will stand up and do that because that's what I do. And that's where the money should be put. You know, I speak all around the world on this subject. It can be done. And your solar, I disagree with you on solar. I absolutely disagree and I disagree that our lovely fields should ever be blocked with all this solar. I agree with that. But solar can be used in different ways to create ammonia, which creates the hydrogen that allows us to move hydrogen and ammonia around the world at a rate that we can then use the electrolysis process to create hydrogen. Only byproduct is water. 2 weeks ago I was at a conference, actually an Eisteddfod in Anglesey in Wales. The whole Eisteddfod was being run by hydrogen. And do you know how we refreshed ourselves? With fresh water produced from the machines for all the kids playing around. That's where we need to be going. So my argument is pull everybody from left and right to the centres, the believers, the non-believers, have a sensible conversation, look at the statistics and go, right, it is what it is. However, to get ourselves out of the problem, let's use innovation. We're at a point where this is I honestly believe, looking at we had Rolls-Royce here 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago we had a delegation again from Rolls-Royce and Westinghouse looking at tidal, looking at the new blades, we're looking at lots of things. But we can power the whole area on 1 reactor the size of a football field. We can do a hydrogen unit here the size of a tennis court. I've just come back from Netherlands, where they run a hospital on the size of a tennis court from hydrogen. Okay, so the tech is there. So my argument is we need to stop all this silliness, the lefts and rights. It's just ridiculous. And the gentleman about the land, he's absolutely right. That's the land has the carbon, fact. What's ruined it is how we have farmed it. So change your farming techniques. It's that simple. Use innovation. So my point is, we are at an almost at a point of industrial revolution at the moment. There would be conversations like this happening back in the 18th century. You know, oh God, we've got steam. Wow, that's exciting. Oh, we've got petroleum. Oh, that's even more exciting. Oh, I'm not going to change my plough and my horse that drags all that stuff up. You know, what we have to do is realise we're at a point where we embrace innovation. You give me £21 million or whatever the budget is, I will make this island carbon-free, reduce costs for people with struggling with their bills, and away we go. So I think that's it. Anyway, thank you very much.
No, thanks, Simon. By the way, we're not disagreeing. I've never proposed hydrocarbons for Jersey. We don't have any hydrocarbons. Don't be ridiculous. That's not the answer. I think the best answer, first of all, is look at the price we're getting. The fundamental premise should be, what is the cost to the consumer? If we have a really good contract from France that we can't beat and it's locked up for 25, 30 years, then any new source has to compete with that price. But any new source, and it won't be oil and gas because we know that's too expensive in bringing it in. I'm a big fan of modular nuclear reactors, by the way. I also like some of the ideas we've got with tidal. The nice thing about tidal is it's continuous. You don't have the disrupts. But if these other ones could work, and solar panels on roofs and EVs, if people want to do it, I have no issue with any of that. I believe in freedom of choice, and I believe that the fundamental should be the economics driving it. All I'm saying, the whole purpose of this is get rid of the boogie bear that CO2 is causing a problem. That's the only thing I'm doing, and then be open to all options. And when you say you want to be carbon neutral, I'm saying that's where we disagree, because I don't think that's the issue. That's the whole purpose of this talk. Well, it's also not my point I've tried to make is that's not the issue. It's like looking for your dime under a light post when you lost it in the dark alley. Go to where the problems are. Anyhow, but I completely agree. Any other comments?
Surely you want to look to the future because petrochemicals have been around for centuries, and also they are very polluting when you burn them. You want to get away from burning stuff, because when you burn stuff you get all those PM 2.5s in the atmosphere, and it makes people ill, apart from anything else. So surely, if you're looking at saving money, you want a way of creating energy and a source of energy that doesn't impact people's health.
Just a quick fact, sorry, that's actually not true.
Is it not?
No, sorry, it's not true.
Okay, but regardless, your point though is valid.
When you have your car driving along.
No, NOx gases, we know how to take 100% NOx gases. PFAS, all the PFAS, we can clear PFAS 100% with technology. NOx gases are now complete. Coal is actually, strangely, one of the best substances to burn for density of power, and how you take the NOx gases out when it burns is the critical piece. You can stand by some of the new cars that run diesel, and you'll have more danger from the radiation off a lithium battery. Seriously, I mean, this is.
So let me just build a little bit on that. No, it's not that we're burning these things. We should absolutely get rid of the pollutants. Completely agree. Technology allows us now to do that more and more. My only point is that CO2 is not the part of the problem. If you realize we could be burning coal, and the only thing coming out after you clean it is CO2 and water vapor, mark my word, there will be a day when the coal industry in northern England will be revived and going full speed ahead, providing coal and cleaning it to the level that's guaranteed to be non-pollutant and other things. So I would let simply supply and demand and price, and I'm a great believer in the ingenuity of people and ability to do things, and let's allow them to do it. But don't put false barriers on things. That's the only reason I'm here.
Can I just add, I'm going to stop after this, I promise. CO2 is really important for island nations around the world for their growing and their subsistence. So there's a couple of farms here that import CO2 in tankers to put into their farms to grow our crops. Taking CO2 out into containers is a critical part of growing plants all over the world. And it's a huge industry. You can shake your head, but I can just show you two invoices.
It's for mostly for cannabis production and tomato production.
Yeah. But
cannabis is a exception. It's a very, very light intensive and CO intensive.
Yeah, I know.
Crop,
we provide power for.
I would disagree with that comment about the impact of CO2 on plants. Okay, go ahead. Yes, go ahead at the back.
General agriculture for greenhouse growing, absolutely.
Okay, I got another question. Sorry, another question.
Can you say a bit more about diverting the funding for the carbon neutral roadmap to more practical things that will help children's health services?
Well, where do you even start with this? First of all, they're putting in, I think the price tag to ultimately get Jersey carbon neutral was hundreds of millions of dollars. I don't have, that's what it would take.
300 million.
300 plus million to get purely carbon neutral. All I'm saying is that's not the problem. Take and see, you could start, you heard, I think, Adrian, you mentioned some comments about prices that in the very short term they're spending. But just think if you took that money, and if you did nothing else, but if you're worried about climate, put it into mitigating the impact of it in Jersey. If you're worried that the tides or something's going to happen, take the money, instead of trying to reduce our minimal amount of CO2 and it's not happening anyway, take the money and use it to something that's practical and helpful. And I do believe if the money was out there and they looked at where's the best place to spend money, and you put all of the various elements, health, education, infrastructure, creating new businesses, etc., I think that money could be much better spent. And by the way, the other thing I like about the modular nuclear idea, which is my favorite for Jersey, is that if you did that and you had more power by doing it, if you got somebody else to come in and build it in a small bit of space that's required, that excess electricity could then be used to create an AI industry right here in Jersey. So it's a win-win, and then you get more people working, etc. So there's a nice win-win spin-off of doing that. But somebody's got to come in and present the case. Yeah.
This might be incorrect. I don't think it is, but I think France is building 9 new nuclear reactors.
7.
7?
7, is it?
Yeah, total output 300 megawatt.
You know, why would we want to compete with a country as sparsely populated and as large as France in terms of building nuclear reactors?
Well, you build it for your energy security because unfortunately Jersey is connected to France. The energy we get from France is excellent. It's all the things that everyone wants.
Well, we should be careful about being scared because one politician said they were going to cut us off. I would look at the quality of the contract. That's all, but I agree with you, actually, we should get it the cheapest place.
On a daily basis working with EDF, so we know that the prices, what's going to happen and all that sort of thing. But the other issue we need to look at is we are on an island. Island security, the way the world is at the moment is a challenge. And you've got to be very careful, however great our friends are or not. You've got 3 cables, cut those cables and you've got 17 diesel engines on Jersey to give us the power. That's the reality. So what you have to then do is make sure you've got your own energy security on island to look after ourselves. It's as simple as that, and that's what we do for Vanuatu, who've got, we drill geothermal for them. Geothermal power, fantastic. Falklands, Skye, all these islands are looking for island security and power.
Well, I guess I don't disagree. I mean, I would take that back to the people of Jersey to decide. Yeah. But what I'd do is I'd say, okay, here's the price of your France contract. Here's the price you have to pay if you're going to get that security. And if it's 10 times higher, they may vote differently. So I would let the number. So it all depends. All these things, it really depends on the price. Go ahead. Yeah.
Graham, could you say something a bit more about how crazy it is to offer a £9,000 grant to change a homeowner's all central heating to electric, where we don't have enough money for proper healthcare for children?
I think you've already answered that one. That was a loaded question, and that's obvious. And by the way, all these subsidies for these people, who are actually getting the subsidies? It's the richer people. Like the whole thing is bonkers, but that's an obvious one, Go ahead, go ahead.
You're right. The money that these up to 300 million that the states are saying they're going to spend, the hospitals have 1 and 2 years waiting lists in some of the departments. The machineries, they need to spend a lot of money on the hospital and sort it out. People's health in Jersey matters. That needs to be one of the things they could spend some of that money on.
Well, I agree, but that's why we elect the politicians. Let them get together, say, okay, if you had this money, a good question for them would be, if you had this money and we took it out of this carbon neutral and we just pretend, recognize that the issue isn't CO2, but energy is very important. If you just gave it back to them and said, okay, now let's have the debate. Let's get everybody, put your best story forward. Let's look at it and see. But the bottom line is it has to impact the people of Jersey directly. That would be my only guideline. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, just to follow up on that question, it all comes down to soil in my point of view. If you've got healthy soils, you've got healthy plants and food and healthy people.
Completely agree.
Absolutely right.
So,
completely agree.
If we could look at the argument and sort of like change it to a flow that can actually be measured and managed. In other words, emitters, it's measured somehow, and also anyone that's actually removing it through certain, soil sequestration actions and things like that can actually can be supported to do it. So you have one for example, hemp, if it's grown properly in decent soils, can grow a lot larger than hemp that's grown in very poor soils, and then it's sequestering a lot more carbon and bringing balance. And so all of this can be done locally, and the Kennebec is known as the hemp field, so we've got capacity. And then following it through on bioenergy, I think Jersey does have the capacity to do that, and it would be a very cheap way of doing both. Improving food security and water security.
Absolutely right.
I think anything we can do to help the farmers in this island is fantastic.
The right type of farmers.
Well,
What's the wrong time?
go ahead, yeah?
Now, have you been too charitable to Jersey Met with the graph you showed? Just I compared that graph. They provide us with a pack for the states debate, and I compared Southern England, the tip of Southern England, with theirs, and then actually, I think Colin saw it. He's got a physics degree. They manipulated the graph, and they sort of the old trick of depressing historic data and increasing, so it actually doesn't even match their own bands on the wall. Yeah. And of course, in fact, it's worse than that. And bearing in mind all the evidence, at what stage do you think we should prosecute the unscrupulous?
Well, my comment will be a little bit different than that. But I have, in my reading through and doing all this research and digging into it, I've found a number of cases where data has been manipulated, where messages have been manipulated. And that's cause for concern. But it happens not just in this domain, all over the place. So wherever you see it, we should challenge it and bring it out. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I didn't finish my
Okay.
sentence. I was
Sorry.
going to say, prosecute them, not least for harming our children's mental health. I mean, I think even Professor Judith Curry, BBC had studies showing a high percentage have nightmares, and putting this sort of fake, this fraudulent advert on a wall. This is all quite, let alone damaging the economy and agriculture and all these crackpot schemes. I mean, it is a big scam, as you say. It's a big fraud, isn't it? So, at what stage?
Well, it bothers me. You could say, no, it doesn't scare them or whatever. But, my big message is relax. Yeah. This isn't the end of the world. CO2 is not the enemy you're talking about. And there's lots of things we can do to do it. But the message to the children and our society is no. And no, it's not, we're not going to, Jersey's Island is not going to be flooded. And we're not going to, all this stuff. It's just not there. Go ahead, there's another question.
I was just going to say that I take exception to the previous comment. I'll declare my interest in that I used to work at Jersey Met, and I worked there for 40 years, collecting data, processing data, what have you. We did not manipulate data, we did not make up data. It is kosher data. Our stations were and still are inspected by competent people from outside, independent people from outside the island. It is not manipulated. So I just want to make that point. Okay, as a person.
No, let's not get into an argument of that specific data.
Can I send you? I've got graphs from Southern England. I showed it to my
we
physicist.
don't do Southern
No,
England.
but I will say, just a second. No, there's going to be cases, and we shouldn't be blaming.
Because the states provided us with a pack with the graph, and it's quite easy to see all the peaks. And it's been definitely has been. So I don't think maybe it was provided to you manipulated. Maybe the data is some along the channel, but it definitely has been.
Well, the Met data provided by me is exactly what I used. I wasn't worried about it at all.
We never have recorded or kept data for Southern England. We do it for Jersey.
No, my comparison. It highlights the fact that you can see the graph as being depressed.
Okay, but you made your point. I got it. And by the way, your point about Met, I used it exactly because I thought it was great data. So I've used your data in my analysis. Absolutely. And I went right back. They were very helpful. They provided it. Very helpful group of people. I was very supportive of your organization. Yeah. Okay, yeah, any other?
Can I just ask, do you think methane is a greenhouse gas or not?
Yes, and by the way, it's more dangerous than CO2. Yeah, but however, then put it in context. Do you realize what low % methane is in the atmosphere?
I'm just
No, my point is,
any climate, any
Okay, in the context of climate and greenhouse gases and methane, as far as being, even though it has a bigger impact, its amount is so much smaller, you can't even see it or measure it. So it's one thing to say, oh, here's a molecule that's going to scare us, then look at the data and put it into context. That's what I tried to do here. So no, I wouldn't be worried about methane because it's so small in concentration levels globally and in the atmosphere that it doesn't play in that context. There may be other issues with methane, but not in that context because it's so small. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sure it's plenty to ask you, but I'm just interested, one of your graphs, you had a big red line saying a sort of death zone
Yes.
or whatever.
Yeah.
I just wondered, you said that humans producing CO2 sort of
Let me
stopped
see if
us
I
from
can
falling into
find
the
that.
death zone. So are you saying that 4.5 billion years of evolution would just stop because we didn't burn oil?
No, of course not. I don't think, did anybody hear me say that? No, just a sec, did anybody hear me say that?
You said this. You said there's a line. It says like
Oh, I did say the line of death.
If it dropped off, if we hadn't
Okay.
stopped producing CO2.
Yes, I'll show you that graph. No, I didn't say that. That's not what I said. To be very clear, and it's taped and recorded, and I'll get you that graph. Just hold on, because this is important. Now, it may have, by the time I got there, it might have been another centuries later.
I've never heard before, so I'm interested.
Okay, all I'm saying to you, because this is true scientifically, if you go to 150 parts per million, plants can't grow. You can please Google and check that. Okay, then recognize that CO2 has been declining over time, had continued to decline, and so you can take your ruler and lay it out and see how long would it take before it went from 180 to 150. My point was, if it keeps declining, and it had been, it would eventually get to 150 because it's declining and it's close. At 180, it's close to 150.
But in 4.5 billion years of these cycles that you say exist, which I agree with you, carbon in the atmosphere and the temperature does cycle, but you're saying that without us producing CO2,
I didn't
it would
do
drop
it.
below 150, which doesn't make
Yeah, I
any
don't
sense.
think I ever said that.
You just did.
No, I didn't. What I said was, okay, what I did say is that I'm trying to find the graph because that's a good graph. I like that one.
So if it's diminishing, it's due to the
Oh, here's the one. Okay,
Well, it's just going to stop.
there we go. Okay, here's the dreaded line of the red. The fact is, if it reaches there at 150, plants will die. And the other fact on that graph is that it was getting close. It was declining. These are historical data. So all I'm saying is, as a scientist looking at graphs, I'm saying it's declining. It's now at 180, and at 150 is the line of death. I'm not saying that other things might happen that increase it. I'm not saying that there could be greater tectonics or other events and the CO2 level could go higher. All I'm saying is that mankind's emissions, what they did do is they moved it from that level of 180, which some people would say is getting pretty close, to 420 and remove that threat. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, but that's the fundamental issue with what you're saying, is that humans stopped it from getting there. What I'm saying is that graph's at 160 million years. Do you really think that the human activity on this planet is what was needed to stop us from...
No, I didn't say that. What I said was, listen carefully to what I'm saying, because there's a difference here. What I said was, it was getting lower, and what the impact of mankind's emissions, which I agree, of added CO2, is it took it from that level of 180 to the level of 420. That's all I said. And that's a fact. I said mankind's emissions of CO2 has taken it from 180 to 420. And that was the point.
You are suggesting that without that, it would have kept...
I didn't say that. I said, here's your graph. Well, there's a trend. Anybody can make their own... Anybody can draw
You're
that.
scaring people by saying it's this red line of death.
I'm not scared.
I'm not scared.
I'm not scared.
You're not scared.
All I'm saying is that is a fact. The 150. You're saying it'll never happen. Well, maybe you're right. Okay. Sorry. Let me get some different people.
Can I respond to that? If there's another the next ice age, could it bring it down because the ocean would absorb more CO2? Is there a possibility that it could have dropped below the line of death if there's...
Well, I would argue on your side that the last 40 haven't. So why would this one? You know, fair enough. We may not get there. No, I mean, it is down and it's getting close, but you know, who knows for sure. All I'm saying, we don't have to worry about that. That's all. That one's gone away. There were some questions at the back there that I want to make sure I hear from different people.
I just wanted to see raise of hands of the people who are scared. Or not scared. Let's put it that way. Not scared. Not scared.
Yeah, okay, just a sec. Go ahead.
Are not running out.
You're scared of fossil fuels?
Running out.
No.
Well, first of all, I'm a geologist, so I would say yes, they're running out. No, I would say yes, they are running. It's a finite resource. I've been wrestling with this my entire career, and I'm an oilman. But how fast is it running out? How many generations have we got? We've got a lot. We've got the reality with technology, as we've got into fracking and finding and digging deeper, we're finding more and more. So it's running out a lot slower than we thought. There were books in the 70s when price shot up, they thought we're going to run out, and that's what drove the price up, that fear. So I don't think we're going to run out in the near term. We eventually will if we keep using it. But I think what's going to happen, independent of fossil fuels, is new technologies like the ones that Simon's talking about. They'll just beat the hell out of oil and gas, and then you won't even have to worry about it. You know, technology and innovation will drive it. So it's not a government mandated thing. It's the real world getting out there and finding ways that are cheaper. And that will happen. And then fossil fuels will still be used, but they'll be making plastics and other things. And I think that's a good idea, personally. I think it's a waste burning it, but I'm not going to force that on people. I think it should be the freedom of choice of people, and there is quite a bit. You know, I keep looking around. There's still a lot to go. Pardon me? Yeah, I suspect there'll be enough for our grandchildren. Just to understand my understanding.
That makes it sound like only just.
No, I did not just. No, I'm saying it's probably. I think that the fear of running out of oil and gas will be replaced before that ever happens with new technologies replacing it. I'm a great believer in people and technology. So I don't think this fear will ever really materialize. I'm not sure I'm going to be around long enough to collect on that bet. My wife certainly hopes not.
As you were saying, relax, global warming saves lives, so we need to chill out, because it's she says up to 25%, 25 times I've some studies I've read, more people die from the cold than the heat. Even in Europe, and your graph showed it. So it's beneficial for mankind. And also the death through severe weather has dropped, as you know, by about 96% over the century. And that's a lot of modern technology, and you know, we can rescue people and we can treat people. So
yeah, no, I mean, when I go on holidays in the winter, I go to Mexico. I kind of like it warm. But you know, that's individual choices. The whole purpose of this wasn't to say all this. I just wanted to challenge some of the premises, you know, the fear of warm and all these things, and just say that the boogeyman isn't CO2. That's the only point. The hobgoblin, yeah, well, the proper terminology. The hobgoblin isn't CO2. That's the purpose of today's discussion. And what I hope is, as we move forward, we share this with our government officials and elected members, and then they consider maybe we should spend that money on other things that are more beneficial to all of you right here. And that's what I'm hoping to accomplish. Okay? I'm sorry the bar is it's probably, oh, there's another hand waving. It's my boss, so I better listen to this one.
I just want to acknowledge that, well done, first of all, Graham and Adrian, regardless of, you know, your views on either side of the house. But I just want to mention that Graham did invite all of our States members to come and listen to this. And looking around the room, I can see Gabriel. Thank you very much, Gabriel. Because that shows enough to come and listen to just as ordinary folk. And I commend you for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gabriel. Well, it looks like we better start electing some more young ones. Okay, thank you all very much. Well, it's been a long night.